Brenton, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, very happy to have you. So, first off, why don't you tell me a little bit about your company, Twibi?
Yeah, so Twibi's been a creation of mine. So it's been around for about 3 years now. I'm the founder and CEO, and I spend a lot of time, going through corporate. And I'm a fairly young guy, so when I say a lot of time, maybe 6 years in
Hmm.
corporate. And there's just a piece of me that just was missing. Just wasn't feeling fulfilled. I'd come home very anxious from work,
Mm.
and then eventually I was let go from what I perceived to be a dream job. I had turned 30 some years ago, and that led to, after me being let go, it led to the creation of Twibi. And so we're a small digital marketing agency that offers mainly paid ad services and some SEO, and it's
Hmm.
been an amazing journey.
No, that's great. 3 years. Still working through those growing pains here and there. You mentioned that you landed your dream job in 2020, and that led to you creating this in like a walk-in closet, if I read correctly, somewhere. I'm kind of curious about that whole arc because, usually one imagines this is it. I got what I wanted. I'm gonna ride the wave for here on out. But then there are other people, it sounds like yourself, who maybe subscribe to don't meet your heroes a little bit. Like what happens when you get what you want and it's not maybe what you expected. I don't want to like project any of that on you. So why don't you tell me, your experience from that getting laid off to the creation of Twibi, maybe how you felt and how those two things connected to you.
Yeah. So the other job is so it's like a director of marketing. I wanted to make at least 100,000,
Hmm.
and so we kept talking. And it was like half marketing, half like sales.
Hmm.
And so I'm just not a salesperson. I'm just purely marketing. And so the more I kept talking to the vice president of marketing, she kept adjusting the role, and it was becoming more and more exactly what I wanted. And then we started talking about salary, and she goes, "We'll pay 120,000." And I was like, "Okay, this is sounding good. This is sounding excellent." And so we signed the papers and everything, and then once I got in there, it just wasn't a very good culture fit.
Mm.
Not at all. Just didn't want to really talk to me after I once I got into the job, and really didn't want to hear my ideas. And then one day I got a meeting invite, and it said catch up was the name of it. And basically HR is on the call, and HR is doing all the talking, and they're like, "Well, we have to let you go. Do you have any questions?" And I was like, "No, you already made your decision, so there's nothing I can say at this point." So I just said, "No, just let me know what my severance is." And so we hung up. And so I think I spent like an hour just like calling people pissed off. I was like, "Okay, well, what are we doing now? Well, what's the plan?" And so then I just got to work on the website, buying the business license, and just dialed in. And so it really feels like a puzzle I'm trying to solve with my business, and it's just fun, man. Instead of watching TV, I'd rather be productive and solve the puzzle.
Hmm. I love that. I also love TV, sadly, but I do love
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And I think there's something really solid in how you pictured, they made up their mind. I'm not going to grovel. I think at that moment, you almost sounds like you decided to do your own thing. I think that's a really cool story. A lot of CEOs and founders like yourself um, feel it's necessary to have that story. Is that how you feel, or that's just that take out the noise that is your story, and so that's kind of what you're sticking to? I know a lot of people really promote a good leader needs a good story who can market well, and I'm curious which one of those camps you kind of subscribe to.
yeah. I felt like it was already kind of a done deal, and
Hmm.
so it's best. I think another thing is after they let me go, I was really upset. So I had wrote out this whole message to put on Glassdoor about how they're a terrible company,
Sure.
and I typed out the whole thing. I spent like an hour typing it out, and then my wife is really good at like, you need to leave the past behind and you need to focus on to the future.
Mm.
And so I showed her the whole message, and she's like, just focus on the future. Like, just delete this whole thing. Don't even post it, and get to work on the next thing. And so I never posted it, and I think that's great. great advice. You know, just
Hmm.
don't live in the past. Just focus on the future.
And I think that you writing that out served its purpose. I think posting
Yeah.
it probably would have done more harm than good. Again, just my opinion, but that is a cathartic feeling to be able to kind of
Yeah.
air your laundry and then just like burn it a little bit. So I commend you for that. I'd like to kind of go over maybe starting with maybe the base necessities that a company needs to have or should do for themselves, maybe before they reach out to a marketing agency like Twibi. I think that's something that we don't really cover often. It's like, I have a marketing budget, so I go to a marketing agency, and I don't think companies cover their bases well enough to where a marketing agency is just doing all the stuff that a company could have done for themselves. What are some of those things?
Yeah. So one thing and I'm gonna assume like, let's say the business has been around for a little bit, so you don't have to
Hmm.
like create like emails, and you don't need to like create a brand new website. So let's say you have like the foundational stuff. But one thing I would say is, if your website isn't up to a certain standard,
Hmm.
and we can create, the most beautiful ads of all time, and then we send someone to what is a poor experience on the website, it's just not going to work. Um, and so that's something that we used to offer, but then we really streamlined, like web development services. We really streamlined away from that so we can be really good at ads. So you really need to have like your brand dialed in, and it's really tough for us as an agency to like develop your brand through writing
Hmm.
ads. Like, if anything, we want to see your website develop nicely so we can leverage that for ads.
Hmm. No, that's great advice because that's the end goal. I mean, people don't buy or sell or make those phone calls until they get, the form or the phone number off of your website, and that has to be easy to find. I mean, that's the goal is for the advertising to get people to the website. I think that's solid advice. What would you consider to be? I know a lot of these questions are going to be a sliding scale or general, but what would you consider to be maybe a competent budget for marketing a brand? Maybe even if it's in a percentage of like, these are my sales. This is how much I should spend on marketing. Because I think that some companies either spend too much or way too little.
Yeah. So I always, so working with clients, I always start with like, what is your goal, like your end goal, right?
Hmm.
And so most clients, they can't quantify it, which sometimes is a little surprising. But I always like I'll pull that out, that I like, what is the revenue number we need to reach by what time, or how many purchases, or what type of ROAS, which is return on ad spend.
Hmm.
Um, and so once they quantify that number, in my standard like process, I'll work backwards from that number, and I'll say, okay, it looks like we need at least 3% click through rate, and then I can keep working it back, and I can say, okay, we need to spend this amount, because the cost per acquisition and this is all going to lead to your goal. So that really depends, but I always say you need to spend at least 1,500 per month, like on the low
Hmm.
end. Like, we have to get above that because we can't really exit learning, and it's just going to run pretty rough, and it's just not a good experience.
Hmm. No, that's great. To my knowledge, Twibi offers a variety of services, right? But are based in paid search, paid social, SEO, and email marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Which of these do you consider to be the most foundational to a brand? Like, if you're not taking care of this one, I can't even begin to take care of these other ones. Or if you're not taking care of this one, I don't know if this will be a relationship that works. Yeah.
Yeah, I would almost say email marketing. And email
Okay.
marketing's not even like our. It's we do email marketing just to, like, support paid ads and SEO. But like, if you don't have like a good email system, so let's say like, no matter what you do, email can like be a nice complementary like thing to add on to it. So let's say we're running paid ads, and we're trying to get someone to fill out the form on the page, and let's say you have a great email program, and then when the person's about to exit the page, you can fire like a pop-up form, and then email can now play a part in paid ads, right? And you get a second
Mhm.
chance to convert that person. Even with SEO, let's say you have a blog post, person's reading it, they're about to exit. You can have a pop-up form. If they fill it out, an email can play a role in the future. So I would say email is definitely like the most foundational, and you can make it super advanced. It can trigger on a million different things.
Hmm. And I feel like with emails, from other people on the show that I've talked to, have said one, it's the closest to free, obviously paid search, paid social, SEO, that stuff that it requires a lot more work, and to be just a competent enough, email you can do for free. It takes a lot of work, but you can, collate those emails, write them up, blast on paper. There are obviously services that make that easier for a fee, but I just to kind of reiterate your answer a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the emails, but it's very time consuming, right? You got to like find the
Exactly.
assets, and I would actually recommend like instead of like image based emails, use like a one to one email, unless it's a
Hmm.
newsletter, right? Then you throw a bunch of images in there and update everyone. But I find better results with like it can be mass produced, but make it seem like it's a text based one to one email.
Hmm. Is would you consider that like the most targeted audience too? Because I would consider, if I'm giving you my email, I want to hear from you. If I am scrolling through, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or if I am just Googling something, I don't know if I want to learn more about you. But if I hand deliver you my address, it's kind of the best targeting you could really get, right?
Yeah, super interested, extremely interested in the brand.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, I agree
Um,
with that.
So you mentioned ROAS. Is that how you and your team at Twibi ultimately measure the success of a campaign?
It is, yeah. So so I'm a big fan of like ratios, right?
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily like how much do we spend, or it's not necessarily like what was the result. It's more of like what was the result for what we spent. And
Hmm.
so that's basically what the return on ad spend is. So it's your revenue divided by your costs. And so typically for like e-commerce products, we can get as high as like a 4 ROAS. So for every $1 we spend on ads, we can get about $4 back, and
That's
that
great.
covers the cogs and my management fee, et cetera. There's still like some margin left over
Hmm.
for the actual client that we're running ads for. But usually it's around like a 2.5 to like 3 ROAS is
Hmm.
what we usually get.
And I feel like that puts everything in much better context. I've spoken with people and seen their websites where marketing that you handled X amount of dollars in sales doesn't really tell me anything. If I'm being honest,
Yeah.
that might be overly candid, but telling me what sort of a ROAS you got for a company, that's an accurate picture. It's telling me how much money that you handled or how much money they made doesn't give the full picture. So I totally agree with that as your ultimate goal. Um, that said, among your services, the paid search, paid social, SEO, and email marketing, which one would you say, if again, I know it's general, if you had to guess, provides the best ROAS for a brand?
Ooh, that's actually interesting because okay, so like paid ads, you have to pay like our agency management fee, and then you have to spend like the minimum 1,500. So that combined, you need to like cover that, and then you need to make margin on top of that to get the
Yeah.
ROAS, right? But then with SEO, you don't have to pay for your ad spend. You have to pay for our management fee, but our management fee goes on like longer before you see results, right? So
Hmm.
it's like an interesting dynamic.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say we have a really good formula for paid ads. So I actually think you get a better ROAS with paid ads in the first, let's say, like 8 months. But then SEO can start to take over. And if you go out like 5 years, then SEO's ROAS can be like way better than
Oh
paid ads.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to
Um,
like commit to it. You got to spend a large amount.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a big bet.
Yeah.
We are definitely in a day and age where companies can go under in that 5 year time period, just because of competition, because of technology, because of just keeping up with the Joneses a little bit. I'm curious why it wouldn't be email marketing. We kind of just talked about how it's practically free, but it just doesn't get the return that should be expected from something that's like free. I'm kind of curious. Logically, it feels it should be that one.
Yeah, it could be email. It's just hard to get the email sometimes.
Okay.
And like, so like on our website, we have like in the footer, you can join our newsletter, and
Hmm.
we'll get like a little trickle, maybe one person every 2 weeks. So we don't quite get the mass effect from it, but you can almost have to use like other channels to kind of build the list a little bit, unless you have like a strong, maybe it's a strong organic social media, which
Hmm.
that's really tough. The algorithm's so random, and you're like you try to recreate what you had done the last time, and then you get hardly any views. So organic social media is pretty tough. Could use SEO, could use paid ads, but it's almost tough to get the email marketing engine going. But I would say that would probably maybe that might outbeat SEO if you can get, because it's so cheap, right? Email marketing is just
Uh-huh.
extremely cheap, so it doesn't take much to beat that return.
You mentioned something that like building your own social media, I think is a lot harder than people might give it credit for. So I think once brands do, they're obligated to say, check us out on Facebook, just like, check us out wherever, because you have to. But actually building that out is so much tougher than people give it credit for. And I think the internet and algorithms can smell when you're trying to like replicate virality. Like when you have a video or a post of some sort that kind of pops off a little bit, and then you try to like replicate that formula, it doesn't work fundamentally. Do you have any sort of speculation on why that is? I mean, you work in this space. There are certain ads that you see on paper should work and then just like don't. Is there any sort of like rationale or reason for that?
Yeah, so on the paid side, I feel like once the algorithm like dials into something that works, it'll work for a while until you fatigue the audience. So it's a little more predictable. On the organic side, I actually stayed away from it a little bit. I rather focus on things that are more predictable, at least in my mind.
Sure.
But my wife has her own business, and so she'll
Cool.
create all this content on organic social media. She's a personal stylist, so it's a very visual factor,
Hmm.
and it does well on Instagram. But she'll create like content where she's like speaking and put all this thought into it, multiple outfit changes, and then she'll randomly show like a 10-second clip of how to button up jeans with like a paper clip, and then that goes viral. That's the easiest one. And then she tries to do it again, something like another like fashion tip,
Yeah.
and it just flops. And she's like, and she gets pretty frustrated. So I'm like, that's why I stay away from organic social media for that reason.
Because you put all the time, effort, and production
Yeah,
value into the thing that's getting half as much as like, a life hack, if you will.
yeah,
I
yeah.
totally buy that. Part of why certain services, I guess, or strategies work better than others is you mentioned brands might be less willing to or have the financial budgetary restrictions to maybe be patient. Is that something that you have to maybe struggle with or deal with regularly? Is, people coming to you with their money, not seeing the return that they want in 4 or 5 months? I've talked about this with a few people on the show. I just think it's fascinating that if I come to you for marketing advice and you give me that advice, and then I'm like, no, I don't want to listen to you. How important is that be patient piece when you're talking to your customers and your clients?
Yeah, that's really important, and I'll try to like really stress that. I'd rather
Mhm.
I'd rather us not work together. Like I'll tell clients, like if you can't go at least 3 months, and I'll even sometimes like show like the payment schedule. The first month is just paying our agency, and then the second month is paying us the same cost, but then you now have ad spend injected into it. And you have to do that again for one more month. So I'll show like the total cost, and I'll say, and we got to commit for 3 months. That's what the contract would be for. And so if you can't commit to that, and if the price is too much, I try to negotiate with price, because
Mhm.
that means that you might. you might not be able to hold out for the whole thing. It's not that I don't want to work with you, but I just see commitment. And I'll reinforce that like every week. Like we gotta finish this out to the end before we have a baseline.
Hmm. And how important is that, like transparency to you and your company?
Yeah, I think with client relationships, expectation, like aligned expectations is the most
Mm.
important thing, right? Like if the client thought they're going to get one thing, but we're already like 2 months into our relationship, and I know we're going to get something else, and we're misaligned. It's a pretty, it's not a good experience. But over the years, I definitely got better at like just sometimes you have to say the same thing, like kind of like eight to
Yeah.
ten times, and then
Hmm.
like around like the ninth time, it's like, oh, I see. And now I understand what you're telling me. So yeah, but it's okay. But some clients
But
still don't understand.
well, and you're totally right. I mean, that's in anything. I feel like is most people have to come to. I know from my personal experience, most people have to come to the knowledge rather than allow the knowledge to come to them.
Yeah.
I have to burn my hand a few times before I realize, I think this is hot. Yeah, I think that's totally valid. On your website and kind of like your business model, diversity and transparency are two of those words that pop up a lot in terms of the importance of them in your work culture. Since you had, actually, I'll form that in a question. So, are those two things important because maybe in your last job at that work culture, that was something that was maybe missing?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've worked at a lot of places where it's just well, it just wasn't a good like work culture, and I had just multiple jobs in a row,
Mhm.
and so I think for me, I just like if I'm going to set the culture for my business, like I know there's like I'll take over an ad account from another client, and they're like, oh, you're going to let us into the ad account? We can see what you're doing, and I'm like, yeah, like I have nothing to hide. Like of course, I want you in the ad account. You can check it out. I just ask you not to make changes, but
Mhm.
you can look at it at any point. And I have clients who are looking at it every week or at our performance. And before we get on our weekly calls, they're like, "Oh, I saw the performance," and they're telling me a little bit, and I'm like, "Okay, well, let's look at the agenda, and I'll give you more detail about that." But that just comes back to like transparency. It's
Yeah.
like I have nothing to hide. Like, come on and check out all the data, and there shouldn't be anything you don't like. But if there is, talk to me because I feel like we can then salvage the relationship from there.
Mhm. And it gives you the opportunity to even contextualize what people are seeing. At the end of the day, it's their data. You just got it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand why a company would collect money to get data for a company and then hoard that data and pretty much just say, trust my word when I say we're doing well. I don't think that's how business really works. So I totally hear you say transparency is vital. Why is diversity important to you in the e-commerce space or more even more specifically in a marketing agency?
Yeah, so as a African American male, I just don't see very many people of color. Like you'll see like Indian or Asian, like you'll see like
Hmm.
that group in like marketing. Like African Americans, you just don't see very many of us. And so this is gonna, I don't know. When I was growing up, I was playing sports and like rappers and stuff. Like that's kind of I feel like our community kind of looks up to. And it's like, but there's other paths, like this you can be a coder, you can make great money, you can be a marketer like myself. There's just so many other great paths. And so
Hmm.
I would love to see more diversity in my field or line of work.
Hmm. And I think what's especially interesting, just to totally add to the value of what you're saying, Brenton, is the most successful rappers, artists, athletes are the ones who are entrepreneurs at the end of the day. Are these Jay-Z's and Beyonce's and Dr. Dre's and people who run their own entire brands, even like a Marshawn Lynch who has a beast mode brand, like all of these people are S tier in their field and in their industry because they're entrepreneurs. I don't think it's the other way around. It's because they have that way of thinking. Um, I think
Yeah,
that's totally valid.
I agree. It's interesting because so I'm gonna take like Rihanna as an example. Like you
Sure,
don't hear
excellent
much about
example.
her. yeah, you don't hear much about her. And then all of a sudden one day someone's like, yeah, she's a billionaire now. I'm like, what? They're like, what music has she released? You know? And they're like, oh no, she started her own fashion brand and da da da. And I'm like, whoa, like she's exponentially grown her wealth, not through the music side, but through the business side.
Mhm.
You know, and yeah, Jay-Z, Kanye, and Kanye might be struggling a little bit, but it's pretty
That is
interesting.
also true. But I think that there is that's obviously a field and an industry that I pay attention a lot to, but I think there's a lot to see in the e-commerce and the tech space because these people, these artists, are not getting paid to be artists anymore. Snoop Dogg recently said he hit 1 billion streams on Spotify and got like, I think it was $450,000 or maybe $45,000. It was something so astronomically low for getting 1 billion plays on Spotify that it forces artists to adapt. And I feel that the same can and will happen when e-commerce and industry titans in this space, who are great at marketing, like yourself, are introduced to a world where everything is AI driven. And then it's like, what do we do? I think kind of throwing our hands up and saying, this system is broken doesn't really get you to a solution. Your Rihanna's, your Jay-Z's, they find a solution when it's not working anymore, versus kind of complaining about that. I think there's something valid there.
Yeah, and I think like as an entrepreneur, and so whether you're a Jay-Z and Beyonce or you're like the average person like me, you just have so much like control over
Mm-hmm.
like what's happening, you know? Like maybe like if you take like a Jay-Z or Beyonce, you have the record label and they're telling you what is going to sound good for the general public and you might not have a lot of control of your image. But then
Mm-hmm.
you get into entrepreneurship and it's like, well, I'm going to do this my way. I have capital to start like Ciroc, or I have now
Sure.
connections. I can start Ciroc. It's like P Diddy, or even as an individual, it's like you're going through corporate and you have the hierarchy of titles telling you what to do, and then you switch over to entrepreneurship, and it's like it's all on you. Like you have full control over how you structure your day. What do you value as most important? How do you plan to like raise money, or et cetera, et cetera. So I like the ability to run your own life.
And does that give any sort of added pressure? I'm someone who has what a friend called, from his own experience, not on mine, analysis paralysis sometimes, where I love being decisive when I am decisive, but then there's that other, I'd probably say 20% of the time, where there's so many options to choose from that I kind of end up doing nothing because I'm worried about making the wrong choice or something like that. That's not as often as it used to be because I've been conscientiously working on that. But that analysis paralysis piece can be tough if that's not a skill that you, yourself are developing. If you're going to be a founder and a CEO, you have to make quick, cogent solutions. Is that your experience? Do you have any sort of added pressure from that, or is that not the case?
I would say it really happens to me. And one thing I do is I'll use my Google Calendar, and so
Oh yeah,
I'll structure out like so I'd almost like okay, so let's say there's just like so many things like floating around. I'm like, oh, I don't know like which way to go. And so the like either the week before or like the night before, I'll just like schedule out all the things that must happen. And then I just promise, I make a promise to myself that you're gonna take it one day at a time, and you just finish out what you had done when you had a clear mind the day before. Like just schedule all those things out. And there's things in
Mhm.
there where I'm like, I don't feel like doing this right now, like and it's like, but you had promised yourself that you'd finish out the day with the random things, you know.
Oh, I totally feel that. Because I can be heavily motivated and heavily sedated very easily.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I kind of wanted to just wrap up our diversity conversation a little bit, because I'm interested just to kind of provide a different viewpoint. I don't know, maybe have you provide why that viewpoint is wrong. Do you think, or do you think other people think, might be even a better way to articulate it, that diversity has the potential to create more conflict in terms of these differing opinions, where you have a group of people who feel strongly this way and a group of people who feel strongly this way. I don't want that. I don't want that conflict. I'm just going to like avoid it altogether. I don't think that's necessarily a healthy solution, but do you think that might inform why that happens?
Yeah, I think so if you're well, first of all, I think it depends on like who are the group of people that
Sure,
are trying to work
100%.
together. And so if you're like well, I think it starts all at the top, right? Like so whoever is at like the highest level, the culture will trickle downwards.
Hmm.
And whoever that person is, it's like you can create a culture of closed-mindedness where you don't want to hear new opinions and new ideas. You look for people to just do exactly what you say. Then that probably will create some conflict when you have like someone on the side like, hey, I have like a new idea and I think we should do it this way. And it's like, well, that's not our culture, which I've been in a lot of places like that. Um, which at that point everyone just kind of gets quiet and we just operate as robots. But if you want, a, like an open-minded culture where everyone's being heard and you're actually looking for real solutions, then you want to grab people from all the different backgrounds. Like it doesn't have to
Hmm.
be just race, but like socioeconomic statuses, male, female, like just grab the whole gambit, and you should have some pretty interesting brainstorming sessions.
Totally. And I think it gives a team an advantage of inclusivity. You know, the more diverse you are, the more effort and work it takes to make everyone feel a little bit more included. And then everyone is working toward a common goal, you know, making, and from my experience, producing movies and TVs and shows and stuff like that is the ultimate team sport because it is like ego to the side. This is my role. This is my lane. Best idea wins. I don't care if it's my idea, as long as the best idea wins, regardless of my age, race, creed, or color, you know? And I think there's something really special that can come from that inclusivity when that happens. But it takes that culture to trickle down. I think that's extremely fair to ascertain there, Brenton.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be. It definitely should be like best idea wins. Doesn't matter who said it, because sometimes even like the title of the person who said it, makes a big difference. Two people can say the exact same thing, and then one person has like a higher title, and it's like, oh, now we'll do that idea. That's exactly what we're looking for, you know. So it's like it
That's
shouldn't
wild.
matter. None of that should matter.
It does, though, somehow. So before we wrap up, I always ask my guest the same last question. E-commerce can be stressful. We were talking about it a little bit. High pressure. You mentioned you work a lot of hours. I'm curious if you have any sort of hobbies or interests that you practice in your free time to help establish and enable a healthy work-life harmony and balance for good mental hygiene.
Oh, work-life balance. Okay, so one thing I do some like I do like presentations. I'll do like public speaking,
Cool.
and so they've been like international, so like Milan or England or there's one in
Very cool.
Vegas, so that was in the United States. And so one thing I'll do is my wife recently became an entrepreneur as well, and so we'll like when I go to do a presentation, we'll tack on like extra time in these like places. So my flight was paid for, and then we'll add on extra time behind that. And so in order to like balance out my schedule to be able to be in Milan and hang out with her, I'll kind of like front load. So I'll work like a ton of hours leading up to something like that.
Mm.
And then once we get out there, it's like it basically like lowers. So I had to work like 20 hours, but the week before I worked 60. So it's kind of a weird balance. I'm still working like a good amount of hours, but I just shift the hours around so I can still have fun and do what I want, and then just lower the TV time. You know, when I project out into the future, there's something more important.
Hmm. And I think that goes back to why we do this a little bit is there is nothing more special to me than like making my own schedule.
Yeah,
Honestly, the
yeah,
pay is fine. But my autonomy of being able to be like, no, can't tomorrow. I got this, you know, or yes, I can. And having a week where I'm just like packed end to end and another one where I'm practically like off is kind of cool, you know? So I think there's a lot there. Brenton, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Good luck with Twibi.